everyone, welcome back to the channel where we bring the most iconic action stories to life. Today we are diving into a true movie story, Die Hard. Die Hard is a 1988 American action film directed by John McTiernan and written by Jeb Stewart and Stephen E. D'Souza, based on the 1979 novel Nothing Lasts Forever by Roderick Thorpe. It stars Bruce Willis, AlanRickman, Alexander Godunov, and Bonnie Bedelia, with Reginald VelJohnson, William Atherton, Paul Gleason, and Hart Bachner in supporting roles. Die Hard follows a New York City police detective, John McClane, Willis, who becomes entangled in a terrorist takeover of a Los Angeles skyscraper while visiting his estranged wife during a Christmas Eve party. Stewart was hired by 20th Century Fox to adapt Thorpe's novel in 1987. His first draft was greenlit immediately, as the studio was eager for a summer blockbuster the following year. The role of McClane was turned down by a host of the decade's most popular actors, including Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. Known mainly for work on television, Willis was paid $5 million for his involvement, placing him among Hollywood's highest-paid actors. The deal was seen as a poor investment by industry professionals and attracted significant controversy towards the film prior to its release. Filming took place between November 1987 and March 1988, on a $25 to $35 million budget and almost entirely on location in and around Fox Plaza in Los Angeles. Expectations for Die Hard were low. Some marketing materials omitted Willis's image, ostensibly because the publicity team determined that the setting was as important as McClane. Upon its release in July 1988, initial reviews were mixed. Criticism focused on its violence, plot, and Willis's performance, while McTiernan's direction and Rickman's charismatic portrayal of the villain Hans Gruber were praised. Defying predictions, Die Hard grossed approximately $140 million, becoming the year's 10th highest-grossing film and the highest-grossing action film. Receiving 4 Academy Award nominations, it elevated Willis to leading man status and made Rickman a celebrity. Die Hard has been critically reevaluated and is now considered one of the greatest action films of all time. It is considered to have revitalized the action genre, largely due to its depiction of McClane as a vulnerable and fallible protagonist, in contrast to the muscle-bound and invincible heroes of other films of the period. Retrospective commentators also identified and analyzed its themes of vengeance, masculinity, gender roles, and American anxieties over foreign influences. Due to its Christmas setting, Die Hard is often named one of the best Christmas films of all time, although its status as a Christmas film is disputed. The film produced a host of imitators. The term, Die Hard, became a shorthand for plots featuring overwhelming odds in a restricted environment, such as Die Hard on a Bus, in relation to speed. It created a franchise comprising the sequels Die Hard 2, 1990, Die Hard with a Vengeance, 1995, Live Free or Die Hard, 2007, and A Good Day to Die Hard, 2013, plus video games, comics, and other merchandise. Deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the United States Library of Congress, Die Hard was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry in 2017. On Christmas Eve, New York City Police Department, NYPD, Detective John McClane arrives in Los Angeles, hoping to reconcile with his estranged wife, Holly, at a party held by her employer, the Nakatomi Corporation. He is driven to Nakatomi Plaza by a limo driver, Argyle, who offers to wait for McClane in the garage. While McClane washes himself, the tower is seized by German ex-radical Hans Gruber and his heavily armed team, including Carl and Theo. Everyone in the tower is taken hostage except for McClane, who slips away, and Argyle, who remains oblivious to events. Gruber is posing as a terrorist to steal the $640 million in untraceable bearer bonds in the building's vault. He kills Executive Joseph Takagi after failing to extract the access code from him and tasks Steele with breaking into the vault. The terrorists are alerted to McClane's presence, and Kyle's brother, Tony, is sent after him. McClane kills Tony and takes his weapon and radio, which he uses to contact the skeptical Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD. Sergeant Al Powell is sent to investigate. Meanwhile, McClane kills more terrorists and recovers their bag of C4 and detonators. Realizing Powell is about to leave, having found nothing amiss, McClane drops a terrorist's corpse onto his car. After Powell calls for backup, a SWAT team attempts to storm the building but is counterattacked by the terrorists. McClane throws some C4 down an elevator shaft, causing an explosion that kills some of the terrorists and ends the counterattack. Holly's co-worker Harry Ellis attempts to negotiate on Gruber's behalf but is killed by Gruber when McClane refuses to surrender. While checking the explosives on the roof, Gruber encounters McClane and pretends to be an escaped hostage. McClane gives Gruber a gun. Gruber attempts to shoot McClane but finds the weapon is unloaded, and he is saved only by the intervention of other terrorists. McClane escapes but is injured by shattered glass and loses the detonators. Outside, Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, agents take control. They order the power to be shut off, which, as Gruber had anticipated, disables the final vault lock so his team can collect the bonds. The FBI agrees to Gruber's demand for a helicopter, intending to send helicopter gunships to eliminate the group. McClane realizes Gruber plans to blow the roof to kill the hostages and fake his team's deaths. Carl, enraged by Tony's death, attacks McClane and is seemingly killed. Gruber sees a news report by Richard Thornburg on McClane's children and infers that he is Holly's husband. The hostages are taken to the roof while Gruber keeps Holly with him. McClane drives the hostages from the roof just before Gruber detonates it and destroys the approaching FBI helicopters. Meanwhile, Theo retrieves an escaped vehicle from the parking garage but is knocked out by Argyle, who has been following events on the limo's CB radio. A weary and battered McClane finds Holly with Gruber and his remaining henchmen. McClane seemingly surrenders to Gruber and is about to be shot but grabs his concealed service pistol taped to his back and uses his last 2 bullets to wound Gruber and kill his accomplice. Gruber crashes through a window but grabs onto Holly's wristwatch and makes a last-ditch attempt to kill the pair. McClane unclasps the watch, and Gruber falls to his death. Outside, Carl ambushes McClane and Holly, only to be shot dead by Powell. Holly punches Thornburg when he attempts to interview McClane. Argyle crashes through the parking garage door in the limo and drives McClane and Holly away together. Cast: Bruce Willis in 2018. AlanRickman in 2011. Bruce Willis as John McClane, a New York City police detective, 2. AlanRickman as Hans Gruber, the ruthless leader of the terrorists, 3. Alexander Godunov as Kyle, Gruber's second-in-command, 2. Bonnie Bedelia as Holly Gennaro McClane, a high-ranking Nakatomi executive and John's estranged wife, 4. Reginald VelJohnson as Al Powell, an LAPD sergeant, 5. Paul Gleason as Dwayne T. Robinson, the LAPD deputy chief, 6. Devorah White as Argyle, John's limousine driver, 5. William Atherton as Richard Thornburg, an unscrupulous TV reporter, 7. Date. Clarence Gilliard as Steele, Gruber's tech specialist, 4. Hart Bachner as Harry Ellis, a sleazy Nakatomi executive, 9. James Shigeta as Joseph Yoshinobu Takagi, Nakatomi's head executive. 4. Other cast members include Gruber's henchman, Bruno Doyen as Franco, Andreas Wisniewski as Tony, Joey Plua as Alexander, Lorenzo Caxiolanza as Marco, Gerard Bond as Christoph, Dennis Hayden as Eddie, Al Leon as Uli, Gary Roberts as Heinrich, Hans Bieringer as Fritz, and Wilhelm von Homburg as James. Robert Davi and Grand L. Bush appear as FBI Special Agents Big Johnson and Little Johnson, respectively. Tracy Reiner appears as Thornbird's assistant, and Taylor Fry and Noah Land make minor appearances as McClane's children Lucy McClane and John Jr. 10. The development of Die Hard began in 1987, when screenwriter Jeb Stewart was in dire financial straits. His script purchased by Columbia Pictures had been abandoned and a contract at Walt Disney Pictures was not providing him with sufficient income. Stewart had 6 weeks between contracted work, so his agent Jeremy Zimmer contacted Lloyd Levin, the head of development at the Gorvin Company, a producing arm of 20th Century Fox. 11. Levin asked Stewart to work on an adaptation of the 1979 novel Nothing Lasts Forever, written by former private investigator Roderick Thorpe. 11. 12. Thorpe had been inspired to write Nothing Lasts Forever by a dream he had, in which armed assailants chase a man through a building, after watching the 1974 disaster film The Towering Inferno. 11. 13. 14. Fox had adapted the book's 1966 predecessor, The Detective, for the 1968 film starring Frank Sinatra as NYPD Detective Joe Leland, and purchased the sequel rights before Nothing Lasts Forever had been written. 11. 13. Levin gave Stewart creative freedom as long as he retained the Christmas in Los Angeles setting. The concept, he considered, would provide an interesting aesthetic. 11. The film was pitched as a Rambo in an office building, referring to the successful Rambo film series. 15. Producers Lawrence Gordon and Joel Silver hired director John McTiernan because of his work with them on the successful 1987 action film Predator. 16. 17. 18. McTiernan agreed to direct on the condition that the film would have some joy and not simply contain mean, nasty acts seen in other terrorist films. 13. Stewart began working 18-hour days at his office at Walt Disney Studios in Burbank, which left him exhausted and on edge. 11. After an argument with his wife, he went for a drive and saw a box in his lane. Unable to avoid it, he was forced to drive over it and discovered it to be empty. According to Stewart, he pulled over on the side of the freeway, his heart pounding. From this, Stewart conceived a central theme of the story of a man who should have apologized to his wife before a catastrophe. He returned home to reconcile with his wife and wrote 35 pages that night. 11. To shape the McClanes' relationship, Stewart also drew upon the marital problems of his peers, including divorces and ex-wives reverting to use their maiden name. 11. Walt Disney Studios in Burbank, California. Jeb Stewart wrote his initial draft in his office at the Walt Disney Studios in Burbank, California. John McClane was named John Ford initially, but 20th Century Fox felt this was disrespectful to the deceased director of the same name. Stewart chose McClane as a good, strong Scottish name, based on his own Celtic heritage. He described the character as a flawed hero who learns a lesson in the worst possible situation and becomes a better, but not a different, person. 11. Having no experience writing action films, Stewart drew on his experience writing thrillers, focusing on making the audience care about McClane, Holly, and their reconciliation. 11. As Stewart pitched his story to executives, Gordon interrupted him, told him to complete a draft, and left the meeting. Stewart finished his first draft just under 6 weeks later. 11. Stewart credits Levin for helping him understand Nothing Lasts Forever. 11. He adapted many sequences faithfully, including a C-4 charge being thrown down an elevator shaft and the book's central character, Joe Leland, leaping from the roof. However, the novel is told entirely from Leland's perspective, and events he is not present for are not detailed. 11, 19, 20. Its tone is also more cynical and nihilistic. Leland visits his drug-addicted daughter at the Gleason building, and she dies having fallen from the building alongside villain Anton Gruber, who is using naive male and female guerrilla soldiers to rob the building because of Gleason's support for a dictatorial government. This made their motivations less clear and Leland more conflicted about killing them, especially the women. Leland is written as an experienced older man working as a high-powered security consultant. 11, 18, 20. Stewart rejected the novel's tone for being too sad and believed an older action hero, Leland being over 60, was nonsensical. Stewart created new material for scenes when McClane is not present, expanding upon or introducing characters. He gave Powell a wife and children, allowing him to relate more closely to McClane, and Argyle, whose novel counterpart disappears early in the story, is present throughout Stewart's draft, supporting McClane by broadcasting rap music over the terrorists' radios. Among the script's original characters is the unscrupulous journalist Richard Dornberg. 11. A fan of prominent Western film actor John Wayne, Stewart was inspired to carry a Western motif throughout the script, including cowboy lingo. He befriended a construction superintendent at the under-construction Fox Plaza in Los Angeles, allowing him access to the building to gain ideas on how to lay out the characters and scenes. He delivered the finished screenplay in June 1987. It was greenlit the following day, in part because 20th Century Fox needed a summer blockbuster for 1988. 11. Casting. Portrait of Bonnie Bedelia looking directly at the camera. Willis chose Bonnie Bedelia, pictured in 1974, to portray Holly Gennaro McClane after he saw her performance in Heart Like a Wheel, 1983. Because Die Hard was based on the novel sequel to the film adaptation of The Detective, the studio was contractually obliged to offer Frank Sinatra the role of John McClane. Sinatra, who was 70 at the time, declined. 12, 13. The role was then offered to various major stars including Sylvester Stallone, Richard Gere, Clint Eastwood, Harrison Ford, 17, 21. Burt Reynolds, 22, Nick Nolte, Mel Gibson, Don Johnson, Richard Dean Anderson, 12, Paul Newman, 23, James Caan, 24, and Al Pacino, 25. The prevailing action archetype of the era was a muscle-bound, invincible macho man like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was offered the role, but he wanted to branch out into comedy and turned it down to star in Twins, 1988. 12. Bruce Willis was known mainly for his comedic role in the romantic comedy television series Moonlighting, starring opposite Sybil Shepherd. He declined the role because of his contractual obligations to Moonlighting, but when Shepherd became pregnant, the show's production was stopped for 11 weeks, giving Willis enough time to take the role. 12. McTiernan's girlfriend had a chance meeting with a representative of CinemaScore and asked them for analysis of Willis as the star. Their analysis showed that casting Willis would not have a negative impact. His participation was confirmed 2 weeks later. 26. The choice was controversial as Willis had starred in only one other film, the moderately successful comedy Blind Date, 1987. 12. 27. At the time, there was also a clear distinction between film and television actors. Though films like Ghostbusters, 1984, had demonstrated that television stars could lead a blockbuster film, Other television actors like Shelley Long and Bill Cosby had failed in their recent attempts to make the transition. Willis received $5 million for the role, giving him a salary comparable to more successful, established film actors like Dustin Hoffman, Warren Beatty, and Robert Redford. 16. 20th Century Fox president Leonard Goldberg justified the figure by saying Die Hard needed an actor of Willis's potential. 16. And Gordon said that Willis's everyman persona was essential to conveying the idea that the hero could actually fail. 29. Other Fox sources were reported as saying the studio was desperate for a star after being turned down by so many popular actors. 30. Willis said, "They paid me what they thought I was worth for the film, and for them." 31. He described the character as unlike the larger-than-life characters portrayed by Stallone or Schwarzenegger, saying, "Even though he's a hero, he is just a regular guy. He's an ordinary guy who's been thrown into extraordinary circumstances." 27. Willis drew upon his working-class upbringing in South Jersey for the character, including that attitude and disrespect for authority, that gallows sense of humor, the reluctant hero. 12. Rickman was already in his early 40s as he made his screen debut as Hans Gruber. He was cast by Silver, who had seen him perform in a Broadway version of Les Liaisons Dangereuses, playing the villainous Vicomte de Valmont. 12. 32. Bedelia was cast at Willis's suggestion after he saw her in the 1983 biographical film Heart Like a Wheel. 33. Val Johnson appeared as Al Powell in his first major film role at the suggestion of casting director Jackie Birch, with whom he had worked previously. Robert Duvall, Gene Hackman, Lawrence Fishburne, and Wesley Snipes were considered for the role. 34. 35. 36. Alice is portrayed by Hart Bochner, an acquaintance of Silva. His role was shot in chronological order over 3 weeks. McTiernan had wanted the character to be suave like actor Cary Grant, but Bochner conceived of the character's motivations coming from cocaine use and insecurity. McTiernan hated the performance initially until he noticed Gordon and Silva were entertained by Bochner's antics. 37. The script continued to undergo changes up to and during filming. Several subplots and traits for characters other than McClane were created during the first few weeks of filming because Willis was still working on Moonlighting. He would film the show for up to 10 hours and then work on Die Hard at night. McTiernan gave Willis time off to rest and tasked D'Souza with adding the new scenes. These included scenes with Holly's housekeeper, Holly confronting Gruber following Takagi's death, an introductory scene for Thornburg, and more moments between Powell and his fellow officers. 38. Silver wanted a scene between McClane and Gruber before the film's denouement, but D'Souza could not think of a plausible scenario until he happened to overhear Rickman affecting an American accent. He realized this would allow Gruber to disguise himself when he met McClane, and the earlier scene of Takagi's murder was reworked to conceal Gruber's identity from McClane. Due to the addition of the Gruber/McClane meeting scene, a different one in which McClane kills Steele was excised. 38. In Stewart's original script, Die Hard took place over 3 days, but McTiernan was inspired to have it take place over a single night like Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. He did not want to use terrorists as the villains, as he considered them to be too mean, and avoided focusing on the terrorists' politics in favor of making them thieves driven by monetary pursuits. He felt this would make it more suitable summer entertainment. 39. McClane's character was not fully realized until almost halfway through production. McTiernan and Willis had determined that McClane is a man who does not like himself much but is doing the best he can in a bad situation. 39. McClane's catchphrase, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker," was inspired by old cowboy lingo, including cowboy actor Roy Rogers' own, "Yippee-ki-ya." kids, to emphasize his all-American character. 12. 19. There was a debate over whether to use yippee-ti-yay, motherfucker, or yippee-ti-yay, motherfucker. Willis endorsed the former. 12. Fox Plaza in Century City, Los Angeles, served as the setting for Nakatomi Plaza. Principal photography began in November 1987 and concluded by early March 1988, with an approximate $25 to $35 million budget. B.C. Filming took place almost entirely in and around Fox Plaza in Century City, situated on the Avenue of the Stars. 18. 44. 45. The location was chosen late in production by production designer Jackson DeGavia. 39. A mostly unoccupied building was needed, which the under-construction Fox Plaza offered. Wink with a frown. 44. It was secured with two main conditions: no filming during the day and no damage from explosions. 18. Cinematographer Jan de Bont said the building's design was distinct, making it a character on its own, and clear views of the building were available from a distance, enabling establishing shots as McClane approaches it. The surrounding city could be seen from within the building, enhancing the realism. 44. De Bont frequently used handheld cameras to film closer to the characters, creating a more cinematic intimacy. Very little of the film was storyboarded beforehand because de Bont believed intricate storyboarding made his job redundant. Instead, he and McTiernan would discuss that day's filming in detail, and the feeling or sensation they wanted to convey. De Bont was more concerned with creating a dramatic rather than an attractive shot. He cited the use of real flares in the film that generated unpredictable smoke and sometimes obscured the image. 44. Willis's first day on set was on November 2, 1987. He came straight from filming Moonlighting to shoot one of his most pivotal scenes, where McClane leaps from a rooftop as it explodes behind him, saved only by a length of fire hose. 12. Willis found acting in Die Hard difficult because it differed from previous experiences in that he was often alone, not having any personal encounters with others. 31. He did not spend much time with the rest of the cast between takes, opting to spend it with his new partner, Demi Moore. In contrast to their on-screen dynamics, Bedelia and Val Johnson spent most of their time between scenes with Rickman. 46. 47. When asked to throw Holly to the floor, Rickman refused because he believed it was not a fitting action for the civilized Gruber and that Holly, a self-possessed career woman, would not have let him. 48. The film's ending had not been finalized when filming began. In the finished film, Theo retrieves an ambulance from the truck the terrorists arrived in to use as an escape vehicle, but as this was a late addition, the truck the terrorists had been filmed arriving in was too small to hold an ambulance. Another scene, showing the terrorists synchronizing their Tag Heuer watches, also showed the truck was empty. This scene had to be deleted, leading to other necessary changes. As scripted, McClane realizes that the American hostage she encounters is Gruber because of the distinctive Tag Heuer watch she observed on the other terrorists. The watches were no longer an established plot point. 39. 49. It necessitated the introduction of a heroic scene for Argyle, who gets to stop Theo's escape. Devorel actually punched Gilliard during the scene, which was added in only in the last 10 days of filming. 38. 47. There was flexibility with some roles, depending on the actors' performances, meaning some characters were kept in the film longer and others killed off sooner. 38. The actors were also given some room to improvise, like Theo's line, "The quarterback is toast," Bachner's "Hans, Bobby, on your white knight," and the henchman Uli stealing a chocolate bar during the SWAT assault. 37. 47. McTiernan took stylistic influence from French New Wave cinema when editing the film. He recruited Frank J. Uriosti and John F. Link to edit scenes together while in mid-motion, contrary to the mainstream style of editing used at the time. 50. Kamen initially saw a mostly incomplete version of Die Hard and was unimpressed. 52. He saw the film as primarily about a phenomenal bad guy who made McClane seem less important. 52. Kamen was dismissive of film scores, believing they could not stand alone from the film. 57. His original score incorporates pizzicato and arco strings, brass, woodwinds, and sleigh bells added during moments of menace to counter their festive meaning. 56. 54. There are other uses of classical diegetic music in the film. The musicians at the party play Brandenburg Concerto No. 3 by Johann Sebastian Bach. 54. McTiernan did not like a piece created for the final scene in which Kyle attempts to kill McClane, and decided to use a temporary track that was already in place, a piece of James Horner's unused score for Aliens, 1986. Cues are also used from the 1987 action film Man on Fire. 39. 55. Die Hard also features Christmas in Hollis by Run DMC, which would go on to be considered a Christmas classic, in part because of its use in the film. 58. The perception of film stunts changed shortly before production of Die Hard following a fatal accident on the set of Twilight Zone, the movie, 1983, and a push was made to prioritize a film's crew over the film itself. 59. Even so, Willis insisted on performing many of his own stunts, including rolling down steps and standing on top of an active elevator. 12. 44. The first scene he shot was his leap from the top of Nakatomi Plaza with a fire hose wrapped around his waist. The stunt involved a 25-foot, 7.6 m, leap from a 5-story parking garage ledge onto an airbag as a 60-foot, 18 m, wall of flame exploded behind him. He considered it to be one of his toughest stunts. 12. 27. The explosive force pushed him towards the edge of the airbag and the crew was concerned he had died. 12. Stuntman Ken Bates stood in for Willis when his character is hanging from the building. 60. AlanRickman hanging from a raised platform. AlanRickman was suspended from a raised platform and dropped onto an airbag. To capture the descent, an automated system controlled the camera's focus ring to keep Rickman in focus. A set was used for the following scene where McClane shoots out a window to re-enter the building. It was shot approximately halfway into the filming schedule so that all involved had gained more stunt experience. The window was made of fragile sugar glass that took 2 hours to set up, and there were only a few takes for this reason. Instead of a hoist, a team of stuntmen positioned below the window dragged the hose and pulled Willis towards the edge, as they could better control Willis's fall if he went over. 59. Editor Frank Uriosti taped the scene where McClane falls down a ventilation shaft and catches onto a lower opening. Willis's stuntman accidentally fell further than intended. 39. During a scene where McClane shoots a terrorist through a table, Willis, firing the weapon while holding it compressed into his upper chest, suffered a permanent 2/3 hearing loss in his left ear caused by firing loud blank cartridges close to his head. 61. 62. For Gruber's fall from Nakatomi Plaza, Rickman was dropped between 20 and 70 feet, 6 and 21 m. Reports are inconsistent. 39. 44. 63. He was suspended on a raised platform and dropped onto a blue screen airbag. 39. 63. This allowed the background behind him to be composited with footage taken from Fox Plaza and falling confetti that looked like bearer bonds. Rickman had to fall backward onto the bag, something stuntmen avoid to control their fall. 63. McGinnon convinced Rickman by demonstrating the stunt himself and falling onto a pile of cardboard boxes. 59. Rickman was told he would be dropped on a count of 3, but he was let go earlier to elicit a genuine look of surprise. McTiernan said, "There's no way he could fake that." Duck, 39:59, the first take was used, but McTiernan convinced Rickman to perform a second one as backup, 63. Capturing the stunt was difficult because it was impossible for a human operator to refocus the camera fast enough to prevent the image from blurring as Rickman fell away, 59, supervised by visual effects producer Richard Edlund. Boss Film Studios engineered an automated system using a computer that rapidly refocused the camera via a motor on its focus ring, 63. A wide-angle lens camera shooting at 270 frames per second was used, creating footage that played 10 times slower than normal. Despite these innovations, the camera struggled to keep Rickman entirely in focus during his 1.5-second fall. The scene cuts away from Rickman as the usable footage runs out. To complete Gruber's failed descent, Bates was lowered 318 feet, 97 meters, from Fox Plaza in a harness that slowed his fall as he neared the ground, 59, 63, 64. Some of the Fox Plaza residents, frustrated by the debris and destruction around the building, refused to turn off their office lights for exterior shots of the plaza. Months of negotiations took place for permission to drive a SWAT vehicle up the steps of Fox Plaza. A railing knocked over during shooting was never replaced. Small explosives moving along a guide wire were disguised as the terrorist rockets, giving the appearance of them striking the vehicle. In the scene where McClane throws C4 down the elevator shaft to stop the assault, the effects team unwittingly blew out every window on one floor of the building, 44. The final helicopter scene took 6 months of preparation, and only 2 hours were set aside to film it. It took 3 attempts above Fox Plaza, and 9 camera crews filming with 24 different cameras. Bont said the different angles enhanced the on-location realism. It contained a recreation of the Frank Lloyd Wright-designed house Fallingwater. DeGavia reasoned that it reflected the contemporary trend of Japanese corporations buying up American corporate assets. An early design for the Nakatomi logo was too reminiscent of a swastika, and it was redesigned to look closer to a samurai warrior's helmet. A 380-foot-long, 120 map painting provided the city backdrop as viewed from inside the building's 30th floor. It featured animated lights and other lighting techniques to present both moving traffic, daytime and nighttime. Expectations for Die Hard were low compared to its action film competition, the Schwarzenegger starring Red Heat and Clint Eastwood's The Deadpool. The New York Times noted that Die Hard, and the comedies Big Top Pee-wee and Bull Durham, would be closely scrutinized by the industry for success or failure. Die Hard was singled out for Willis's salary, and the failure earlier that year of his previous film, The Western Sunset, which brought into question his leading man capabilities. 41. Lawrence Gordon agreed that not using a major action star like Stallone or Eastwood meant audience interest in Die Hard was lower than it might have been. The larger salaries paid to these stars were based on the built-in audience they could attract to a film's opening week, with good word of mouth supporting the film thereafter, but Willis did not have a built-in audience. Willis featured prominently in the film's early marketing campaign, but it underwent several changes as the film's release date drew nearer. Willis had developed a reputation as an arrogant actor concerned with his own fame. His refusal to address this, or speak about his personal life to the media, had reinforced this perception. For his part, Willis said that he wanted the media to focus on his acting. There were reports that cinema audiences would moan at Willis's appearance in Die Hard trailers, and that a representative from an unnamed theater chain had pulled the trailer in response. 66. Research by several film studios revealed that audiences had a negative opinion of Willis overall and little or no interest in seeing him in Die Hard. 29. Newsweek's David Anson called Willis, the most unpopular actor ever to get $5 million for making a movie. As 20th Century Fox's confidence in Willis's appeal faltered, the film's posters were changed to focus on Nakatomi Plaza, with Willis's name billed in tiny print. 2166. Willis's image was not included in the film's first full-page newspaper advertisement in mid-July. 29. 20th Century Fox executive Tom Sherrack denied that Willis was being hidden, saying their marketing strategy had changed when they realized that the building was as important a character as the actor. 66. Defying expectations. Sneak previews of the film were well received by audiences. 29. And the week following its release, the advertising began featuring Willis more prominently. 29. Despite his dislike of interviews, Willis appeared on several daytime shows to promote the film. Explaining why he was more involved in the promotion for Die Hard, Willis said, "I'm so excited about this film. To me, it represents why I wanted to be an actor." Die Hard's premiere took place on July 12, 1988, at the AFCO Theater in Los Angeles, California. 68. In North America, the film received a limited release in 21 theaters in 13 cities on July 15, 1988, earning $601,851, an average of $28,659 per theater. 69. It was considered a successful debut with a high per-theater average gross. 70. The Los Angeles Times said that the late change in advertising focus and diminishing popularity for action films should have worked against Die Hard. Instead, positive reviews and the limited release had made it a must-see film. It received a wide release the following week on July 22, 1988, across 1,276 theaters, and earning $7.1 million, an average of $5,569 per theater. The film finished as the number 3 film of the weekend, behind Coming to America, $8.8 million, in its 4th week of release, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, $8.9 million, in its 5th. 72. The film fell to number 4 in its 3rd week with a further gross of $6.1 million, just behind Coming to America, $6.4 million, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, $6.5 million, and the debuting romantic comedy Cocktail, $11.7 million. 73. In its 4th weekend, it rebounded to the number 3 position with $5.70 million. 74. While the film never claimed the number 1 box office ranking, it spent 10 straight weeks among the top 5 highest-grossing films. 17. 74. In total, the film earned an approximate box office gross of between $81.3 million and $83 million. 75. 76. This made it the 7th highest-grossing film of 1988, behind Crocodile Dundee 2, $109.3 million, Buddy Comedy Twins, $111.9 million, Fantasy Comedy Big, $114.9 million, Coming to America, $128.1 million, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, $154.1 million, and comedy drama Rain Man, $172.8 million. The summer of 1988 saw box office grosses totaling $1.7 billion, breaking the previous year's record-breaking summer by $100 million. 65, and it was the most successful summer since 1984, when only 3 films earned more than $100 million in North America. 80. Defying pre-release expectations, Die Hard was considered an enormous success. 12. 80. In a year otherwise dominated by comedy films, Die Hard's overperformance was an anomaly compared to other action films such as Rambo 3 and Red Heat, which failed to meet box office expectations. 15. 81, film critic Sheila Benson believed this demonstrated a generational shift in audiences and their tastes. In particular, 25 to 37-year-old men had turned against alcohol abuse, sexism, and mindless machismo. 82, along with films like Big and Young Guns, 1988. Die Hard is credited with revitalizing 20th Century Fox, which had had few successes in preceding years. It also showed the action genre was not dead. 65. Initial critical reviews of Die Hard were mixed. 43. Audiences reacted more positively. Polls by the market research firm CinemaScore found that audiences gave it an average rating of A+ on an A+ to F scale. 83. McTiernan's direction was praised. In the Chicago Tribune, Dave Kerr wrote that McTiernan's logical direction created a sense of scale in the film that made it seem more significant than its content. 84. The scene in which the terrorists take over the building was described as a textbook study by Kevin Thomas, providing a strong introduction to both McTiernan's abilities and de Bont's cinematography. 2. DeGavia's set design was complimented by Kerr as ingenious. 84. Ebert praised the stunts and special effects. 86. Critics were conflicted over Willis's performance. Many considered Die Hard Willis's breakout role, reviving his faltering transition from television to film star, and demonstrating his leading man status and comedic range. 2. 5. 88. Kathy Huffines and James Mills considered Willis's performance an evolution of his moonlighting character David Addison with less sexism and more masculinity. Huffines wrote that the performance improved as Willis hewed closer to his own working-class background. 89, 90, 91. Reviewers including Terry Lawson and Paul Willestein believed that despite expectations, Willis had been well cast, bringing a necessary vulnerability and sense of humor to a contemporary hero, one who displays remorse, fear, and indecision without being overly macho or comedic, and delivers dialogue that other action stars could not. 92. Mark Andrews argued that this vulnerability was essential to creating tension because audiences care about the character's fate. 93. Some reviewers felt that Willis's strongest talent, his comedic ability, had been woefully underutilized. Writing for the Washington Post, Hal Hinson complimented Willis's grace and physical bravado that allowed him to stand alongside the likes of Stallone and Schwarzenegger. Conversely, Vincent Canby said he lacked toughness. 85, 87. Reviewers generally agreed that Willis's dramatic acting was unimpressive or limited. Jay Boyar believed his abilities were perfect for McClane, although Kerr criticized him as only a television-level star. 84, 95, 96. Richard Schickel said Willis's performance was whiny and self-involved, and that removing his undershirt by the film's denouement was the totality of his acting range. He acknowledged it was difficult to perform when acting only against special effects. 97. Rickman's performance was praised. Karen James said he was the film's best feature, portraying the perfect snake, 3, and Hinson likened his work to the sneering, malevolent performance by Laurence Olivier in Richard III, 1955. 87. Kerr called Gruber a classic villain who combined the silliness of actor Claude Rains and the smiling dementia of actor George Recready. 84. Canby said that Rickman provided the only credible performance, and Roger Ebert, who was otherwise critical of the film, singled it out for praise. 86. Critics routinely praised Bedelia's performance and lamented that she was underused, in favor of McClane's and Powell's relationship. Schickel highlighted a scene in which McClane confesses his sins to Powell before rescuing his wife, robbing their marital reunion of meaning. 97. Ebert and Schickel both felt that only McClane's and Powell's characters were developed. 87, 97. The film's success was credited to the remote relationships built between Willis, Rickman, and Velgenson by Mike Sidoni, 91. Hofheinz and Mills credited the performances with anchoring the film, 89. 190. Ebert focused his criticism on the police captain, portrayed by Gleason, citing the character as an example of a willfully useless and dumb obstruction that wasted screen time and weakened the plot. 86. Thomas commended the casting of several minority actors, too. The action and violence were criticized by many reviewers. Kevin Thomas said the film had plot holes and lacked credibility. He believed it was the result of a calculated effort to please the broadest possible audience, and concluded that it had squandered its potential as an intelligent thriller for numbing violence and carnage. 2. Canby offered a similar sentiment, suggesting the film would appeal only to audiences that required a constant stream of explosions and loud noises. He described it as a nearly perfect movie for our time, designed to appeal to audiences can be described as kidults, adults with the mindset of children. 85. One violent scene, in which Powell saves McClane by shooting Kyle, was singled out. Schickel believed it to be a cynical scene that undermined the humanity formed between McClane and Powell, by having Powell find redemption for his own mistakes through violence. Hinson believed the audience was deliberately manipulated into cheering for the act. 2. 87. 97. Writing for the New York Times, James said the film offered fun escapism while relying on action cliches, but Hinson countered that despite the relentless thrills, the film was non-enjoyable. 87. Reviews identified allusions in Die Hard to films such as The Towering Inferno and The Poseidon Adventure, 1972, Alien, 1979, Aliens, and RoboCop, 1987. Care said Die Hard emulated Alien and RoboCop by developing a humorous and sentimental design that perfected the action genre, but in doing so it lacked a personality of its own. 84. Writing for the Poughkeepsie Journal, Sidoni felt Die Hard made previous action blockbusters such as Predator, Missing in Action, 1984, and Rambo look like Tupperware parties. Die Hard was released on Video Home System, VHS, cassette in January 1989, 104. It was a popular rental, debuting as the third most rented film on the early February rental charts, rising to number 1 the following week. It spent 6 of its first 7 weeks in release at number 1 until it was replaced by A Fish Called Wanda at the end of March, 105, 109. By 1997, it was estimated to have earned $36 million from rentals, 110. Die Hard was released on DVD in 1999 as part of a collection with its sequels Die Hard 2, 1990, and Die Hard with a Vengeance, 1995. 111, 112. It was released separately as a special edition DVD in 2001, including commentary by McTiernan, DeGavia, and Edlund, and deleted scenes, trailers, and behind-the-scenes images. 113, 114. It was released on Blu-ray in 2007. 115. Die Hard. The Nakatomi Plaza collection was released in 2015, collecting all 5 Die Hard films on Blu-ray in a container. Shaped like Nakatomi Plaza, 116, for its 30th anniversary in 2018, a remastered 4K resolution version was released on Ultra HD Blu-ray. The set also includes a standard Blu-ray and digital download. A limited edition steelbook case version was also released. 117. Other media. See also, Die Hard video games. Die Hard merchandise includes clothing, Funko Pops, coloring and activity books, crockery, Christmas jumpers and ornaments, and an illustrated Christmas book retelling the film. 118. A third-person shooter video game, Die Hard. was released in 1989 for the Commodore 64 and Windows. Different top-down shooter versions were released for the TurboGrafx-16 and the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES. The TurboGrafx-16 edition begins with McClane fighting terrorists in a jungle. The NES version offers a foot meter that slows McClane's movements after he repeatedly steps on shattered glass. 119, 120. Die Hard Trilogy, 1996, a popular game for the PlayStation, adapted the first three Die Hard films, 121, 122. In 1997, the Japanese arcade game Dynamite Deco was redesigned and released in Western territories as Die Hard Arcade. Players choose either McClane or secondary character Chris Thompson to battle through Nakatomi Plaza, defeat terrorists led by White Fan, and rescue the president's daughter. Die Hard, The Ultimate Visual History, a book chronicling the development of the Die Hard film series, was released in 2018 to coincide with the film's 30th anniversary. 124. A board game based on the film was released in 2019. Developed by USAopoly, Die Hard, the Nakatomi heist casts up to 4 players as McClane, Gruber, and his terrorists, each vying to complete their opposing tasks. A painting of Odysseus and Telemachus preparing to slaughter the suitors of Odysseus's wife Penelope. An 1812 painting by Joseph Ferdinand Lancrenon, Fr., of Odysseus, aided by Telemachus, preparing to slaughter his wife's suitors. Alexander Boone compared Odysseus's tale to John McClane's quest to rescue his wife from the terrorists. Die Hard has been described by critics such as Richard Brody and Chris Hewitt as a story about obtaining redemption through violence. McClane comes to Los Angeles to save his marriage, but makes the same mistakes that drove Holly away. Brody and Hewitt suggest that it is only after McClane defeats the terrorists through violence that their marriage is seemingly reconciled. 4:18. Similarly, Powell is haunted after accidentally shooting a child and finds redemption by drawing his gun to shoot Kyle. 4. Several male characters who are driven by rage or ego suffer for it, including the FBI agents, Kyle, Ellis, and McClane, who nearly loses Holly by showing off after shooting Gruber. Ebert notes the more even-tempered characters, often African American, fare better. 15. McClane identifies himself as a Roman Catholic, a religion requiring penance to earn redemption. Brody said that McClane endures physical punishment, including his feet being cut by glass shards to create bloody stigmata. In making these sacrifices, he salvages his family. In this sense, McClane can be seen as a modern, working-class Christ-like figure. 4. Alexander Boone compares McClane violently reclaiming his wife to the Greek figure Odysseus slaughtering his wife's suitors. McClane is rewarded for his masculinity, despite demonstrating negative male traits. 127. Jeffrey Brown believed McClane's undershirt emphasizes his masculine physical form. This outfit is worn by other action characters like Rambo, and female characters displaying masculine traits such as Rachel McClish, Aces, Iron Eagle 3, and Linda Hamilton, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. 128. Powell and Argyle are not McClane's physical equals, but they prioritize relationships, and when called on to act, they succeed. 129. McClane possesses an imposing physicality but is clumsy and reliant on improvisation, and succeeds only because of the relationships with his allies. 129. It is McClane and Powell's relationship that is particularly instrumental to McClane's success. The pair share a non-romantic intimacy that enables McClane to confess his failings as a husband in a way he did not with Holly, allowing McClane to grow as a person. 130, 131, 132. Gruber fails because he is isolated, self-interested, and sacrifices his team for his own survival. 131. Peter Parshall observed that McLean and Gruber are reflections of each other. 131. Brody contrasts McLean, an all-American stereotype compared to Western cowboy stars like Roy Rogers, John Wayne, and Derry Cooper, to Gruber, a classically educated, European villain who refers to America as a bankrupt culture. 418. Elizabeth Abel wrote that when compared to the superheroes of the previous decade in films like Superman, 1978, and Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981, McLean is portrayed as physically but realistically masculine, conveying the ideal of a real man who possesses independent, intrinsic strength. 133. According to Justin Chong and Mark Olson, this can be seen as a response to Reaganism, the political positions of United States President Ronald Reagan, promoting values of the American dream, self-reliance, initiative, and technological advancement. 134. 135. Willis believes that if given the choice, McLean would pass the responsibility of dealing with the terrorists onto anyone else, but he is ultimately compelled to serve as a reluctant hero. 12. When the character is introduced, he is wearing his wedding ring. Scott Tobias wrote this serves as a symbol of his marital commitment. Holly is presented as the opposite. She uses her maiden name and is not wearing her wedding ring. Instead, she is gifted her Rolex watch by her employers, serving as a symbol of her commitment to her job and the division in her marriage. When McLean unclasps the watch at the film's end to free Holly from Gruber's grasp, the totem of their separation is broken, and they appear to have reconciled. 132. 136. Parshall describes the negative portrayals of female characters in Die Hard. They appear sexualized in pin-up posters, suggest drinking while pregnant, or are away from their families on Christmas Eve at a work function. Holly takes a position of authority following her boss's death, but that power is delegated to her by Gruber, and it is used in traditionally feminine ways to care for her colleagues. Takagi is replaced in Holly's life with a different dominant male, McLean. 131. Darren Payne wrote that Die Hard reflects the contemporary decline of men as the main household earner as more women joined the workforce and blue-collar jobs were being lost to foreign countries. In response, an American cowboy saves the day, rescuing his captured wife from a foreign-owned tower. 137. Die Hard has elements that are anti-government, anti-bureaucracy, and anti-corporation. 418. 13. A terrorist asserts McLean cannot harm him because there are rules for policemen, rules he intends to exploit. McLean responds, "So my captain keeps telling me," suggesting that he operates outside of bureaucratically approved procedures. 413. Brody wrote that the police often present a bigger obstacle than the terrorists. They believe they are in control of events, unaware the terrorists have already anticipated their every action. 4. The police chief is portrayed as incompetent, and the FBI is shown to be indifferent to the lives of the hostages as long as they kill the terrorists. 4. 138. McLean is an everyman fighting against terrorists who are dressed like elite big city workers. 18. As Ellis states, the only difference between the corporate employees and the terrorists is that he uses a pen and Gruber uses a gun. 131. The police, the FBI, and an intrusive journalist are each punished for standing in McLean's way. 18. Parshall noted the Christmas setting can be seen as an attack on traditional societal values. The corporation hosts a party on Christmas Eve, keeping employees away from their families, and the villains cynically appropriate Christmas iconographies. By defeating them, McLean upholds tradition and defends society. 131. Alongside the mainly German group of terrorists, Nakatomi Plaza is owned by a Japanese corporation, and the hostages are American. 4. 137. 139. Brody identified this as reflecting American anxieties about foreign towers at a time when Japanese technology firms threatened to dominate the American technology industry. 4. 135. 137. When McLean prevails, the suggestion is that American ingenuity will prevail. 139. America's old enemies, Germany and Japan, are portrayed as having forsaken their integrity in the pursuit of financial gain. 85. Dave Kerr said the film embodies a resentful 1980s, blue-collar rage against feminists, yuppies, the media, the authorities, and foreign nationals. 84. Brody notes that the film can also be considered progressive in its portrayal of its African American characters, as cast members Val Johnson, Gilliard, and White are featured in prominent and important roles. 4. The AV Club noted that unlike many other 1980s films, Die Hard is not an allegory for the Vietnam War. The film mocks the idea when one FBI agent remarks that their helicopter assault is reminiscent of the war. His partner responds that at the time he was only in middle school. 140. Even so, Empire believed the film references Vietnam by showcasing an ill-equipped local taking on highly equipped foreign invaders. This time America wins. 18. Drew Ayers described the complex layout of Nakatomi Plaza as analogous to the concealing jungles of Vietnam. Before Die Hard's release, Hollywood action films often starred muscle-bound men like Schwarzenegger and Stallone, who portrayed invincible, infallible, catchphrase-spouting heroes in unrealistic settings. Willis's portrayal of John McClane redefined the action genre, presenting a normal person with an average physique completely counter to that archetype. He is failing, both personally and professionally, and serves as a vulnerable, identifiable hero who openly sobs, admits his fear of death, and sustains lasting damage. Importantly, his one-liners do not come from a place of superiority over his foes, but as a nervous reaction to the extreme situation in which he finds himself, which he is able to overcome only through enduring suffering and using his own initiative. 12, 18, 20, 140. Similarly, Rickman's portrayal of Gruber redefined action villains who had previously been bland figures or eccentric madmen. Gruber ushered in the clever nemesis. He is an educated, intelligent villain who serves as the antithesis of the hero. 18. He has been referred to as one of the most iconic villains in the genre. 140. Empire magazine called Gruber one of the finest villains since Darth Vader. Rickman described the role as a huge event in his life. 18. Though other more typical 1980s-style action films were released, the genre gradually shifted to a focus on smaller, more confined settings, everyman heroes, and charming villains with competent plans. 140. Die Hard raised Willis from television stardom to worldwide recognition and brought fame to Rickman. 12. Willis's salary was seen as the peak of the 1980s bidding wars between new and old managers vying for jobs. The New York Times described it as the salary equivalent of an earthquake, and MGM/UA chairman Alan Ladd Jr. said that it threw the business out of whack. Like everybody else in town, I was stunned. That was seen as the most substantial change to salaries since Dustin Hoffman was paid $5.5 million to star in Tootsie, 1982, at a time when top salaries ranged from $2 million to $3 million. It was expected that salaries for major stars would increase significantly to ensure they were paid more than a newer star like Willis. 16. 142. McTiernan transitioned his success into directing an adaptation of one of his favorite novels, The Hunt for Red October, 1990. 143. Val Johnson's performance resulted in his casting in the 1989 to 1998 sitcom Family Matters. One of the most influential films of the 1980s, Die Hard served as the blueprint for action films that came after, especially throughout the 1990s, 136. The term, die hard on/in-a has become shorthand to describe a lone, everyman hero who must overcome an overwhelming opposing force in a relatively small and confined location. 12. 136. Examples include Under Siege, 1992, Die Hard on a Battleship, Cliffhanger, 1993, Die Hard on a Mountain, Speed, 1994, Die Hard on a Bus, and Con Air or Air Force One, 1997, Die Hard on a Plane. 12. 136. 140. Willis himself recalled being pitched a film that was Die Hard in a Skyscraper. He said he was sure it had already been done. 12. It was not until the 1996 action thriller film The Rock, Die Hard on Alcatraz Island, that the tone of action films changed significantly, and the increasing use of CGI effects allowed films to move beyond the limitations of real locations and practical stunts. Writing for The Guardian in 2018, Scott Tobias observed that none of these later films readily captured the complete effectiveness of the Die Hard story. 136. The film has been a source of inspiration for filmmakers including Lexi Alexander, Darren Aronofsky, Brad Bird, Joe Conahan, Gareth Evans, Barry Jenkins, Joe Lynch, Paul Scheer, Brian Taylor, Dan Trachtenberg, Colin Trevorrow, and Paul W. S. Anderson. 149, 150, 151. During the COVID-19 pandemic, that was among the action films director James Gunn recommended people watch. 152. The film's popularity has seen it referenced across a wide variety of media, including TV shows, films, video games, music, and novels. It has even been referenced in media targeted at children. 148, 153. Willis cameos as McClane in the 1993 parody film Loaded Weapon 1. 154. There has been much debate over whether Die Hard is a Christmas film. Those in favor argue that the Christmas setting is sufficient to qualify it as a Christmas film. Those opposed argue that it is an action film whose events happen to take place at Christmas. 155, 156. A 2017 YouGov poll of more than 5,000 British citizens determined that only 31% believed that Die Hard is a Christmas film. Those who did skewed under the age of 24, while those opposed were mainly over 50. 157, 158. A similar 2018 Morning Consult poll of 2,200 American citizens determined that only 25% supported its status as a Christmas film. Those aged between 30 and 44, who were young during the peak of the film's popularity, were most in favor. 159. D'Souza and Stewart supported being a Christmas film, while Willis feels it is not. 23. 160, 161, 162. On the film's 30th anniversary in 2018, 20th Century Fox stated that it was the greatest Christmas story ever told, releasing a re-edited Die Hard trailer that portrays it as a traditional Christmas film. According to D'Souza, Silver predicted the film would be played at Christmastime for years. 162, 163, 164. Critical reassessment. Die Hard is now considered one of the greatest action films ever made. 165, 166, 167. On the film's 30th anniversary in 2018, The Hollywood Reporter wrote that Die Hard was easily one of the most influential films in the action genre, whose influence could still be seen in contemporary films. 168. The Guardian and the British Film Institute regard it as the quintessential American action film, the latter calling it one of the 10 greatest action films of all time. 169, 136. Deadline Hollywood labeled it a staple of the action genre that launched a classic franchise. 170, writing for Vanity Fair, K. Austin Collins said that despite the number of times he had viewed the film, that remained a persistently satisfying and well-crafted piece. 13, it is listed in the 2003 film reference book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die, which says that the film effectively redefines the action movie as one-man army. In 2001, the American Film Institute, AFI, ranked Die Hard number 39 on its 100 Years 100 Thrills list, recognizing the most heart-pounding films. 176. In 2008, Empire ranked it number 29 on its list of the 500 greatest movies of all time. 165. In 2014, The Hollywood Reporter's entertainment industry voted ranking named it the 83rd best film of all time. 177. The film's characters have also been recognized. In 2003, the AFI ranked Hans Gruber number 46 on its 100 Years 100 Heroes and Villains list. 178. In 2006, Empire ranked McClane number 12 on its list of its 100 greatest movie characters. Gruber followed at number 17. 32. 179. Several publications have listed it as one of the greatest action films of all time, including number 1 by Empire, 180, IGN, 166, and Entertainment Weekly Wink with a Frown 167, number 10 by Time Out New York Wink with a Frown 181, number 14 by The Guardian Wink with a Frown 182, number 18 by Men's Health 183, and unranked by Complex 184, Esquire 185, and Evening Standard 186. Adding to the debate over Die Hard's status as a Christmas film, it has appeared on several lists of the top holiday films, including at number 1 by Empire, 187, and San Francisco Gate, 188, number 4 by Entertainment Weekly, 189, and The Hollywood Reporter, 190, number 5 by Digital Spy, 191, and number 8 in a Radio Times Readers poll. The Library of Congress, LC or sometimes LOC, is a research library in Washington, D.C., serving as the library and research service for the United States Congress and the de facto National Library of the United States. 3. It also administers copyright law for the United States Copyright Office, and it houses the Congressional Research Service. Founded in 1800, the Library of Congress is the oldest federal cultural institution in the United States. 4. It is housed in 3 buildings on Capitol Hill, adjacent to the United States Capitol, along with the National Audiovisual Conservation Center in Culpeper, Virginia, and additional storage facilities at Fort George G. Meade and Cabin Branch in Hyattsville, Maryland. 5. The library's functions are overseen by the Librarian of Congress, and its buildings are maintained by the architect of the Capitol. The LC is one of the largest libraries in the world. 3. 6. Containing approximately 173 million items and employing over 3,000 staff. Its collections are universal, not limited by subject, format, or national boundary, and include research materials from all parts of the world and in more than 470 languages. When Congress moved to Washington in November 1800, a small congressional library was housed in the Capitol. Much of the original collection was lost during the 1814 burning of Washington by British forces during the War of 1812. Congress accepted former President Thomas Jefferson's offer to sell his entire personal collection of 6,487 books to restore the library. The collection grew slowly and suffered another major fire in 1851, which destroyed 2/3 of Jefferson's original books. The Library of Congress faced space shortages, understaffing, and lack of funding, until the American Civil War increased the importance of legislative research to meet the demands of a growing federal government. 7. Clarification needed. In 1870, the library gained the right to receive 2 copies of every copyrightable work printed in the United States. It also built its collections through acquisitions and donations. Between 1890 and 1897, a new library building, now the Thomas Jefferson Building, was constructed. 2 additional buildings, the John Adams Building, opened in 1939, and the James Madison Memorial Building, opened in 1980, were later added. The LC's Congressional Research Service provides objective nonpartisan research to Congress to assist it in passing legislation. The library is open to the public for research, although only members of Congress, their staff, and library employees may borrow materials for use outside the library. Indigo Progress Construction Photographs of the Library of Congress Jefferson Building. A series of photographs depicting the construction of the Thomas Jefferson Building between 1888 and 1894. 1800 to 1851, Origin and Jefferson's Contribution. In 1783, James Madison, a founding father and the nation's 4th president, proposed creating a congressional library, but failed to gain necessary support for the idea. After the American Revolutionary War, however, the Philadelphia Library Company and New York Society Library served as surrogate congressional libraries when Congress convened in those cities. 9. On April 24, 1800, the Library of Congress was established when John Adams, the nation's 2nd president, signed an act of Congress, which appropriated $5,000 for the purchase of such books as may be necessary for the use of Congress, and for fitting up a suitable apartment for containing them. 10. Books were ordered from London, forming a collection of 740 books and 3 maps housed in the new United States Capitol. 11. Adams' successor as U.S. President, Thomas Jefferson, also played a crucial role in shaping development of the Library of Congress. On January 26, 1802, Jefferson signed a bill allowing the President to appoint the Librarian of Congress and establishing a joint committee on the library to oversee it. The law also extended borrowing privileges to the President and Vice President. 12. 13. In August 1814, British forces occupied Washington and, in retaliation for American acts of destruction in Canada, burned several federal government buildings. Among the buildings burned was the Library of Congress, which saw over 3,000 of its volumes destroyed. 11. These volumes were held in the Senate wing of the Capitol. One surviving volume was a government account book from 1810. 13. 14. 15. The volume was taken by British Admiral George Cockburn as a souvenir, and was later returned to the U.S. in 1940 by his family. 16. Within a month, Jefferson offered to sell his large personal library, 17, 18, 19, as a replacement. He had reconstituted his own collection after losing part of it to a fire. Congress accepted the offer in January 1815, appropriating $23,950 to purchase his 6,487 books. 11. Some House members, including New Hampshire Representative Daniel Webster, opposed the purchase, wanting to exclude books of an atheistical, irreligious, and immoral tendency. 20. Jefferson's collection, gathered over 50 years, covered various subjects and languages, including topics not typically found in a legislative library. 9. He believed all subjects had a place in the Library of Congress, stating, "I do not know that it contains any branch of science which Congress would wish to exclude from their collection. There is, in fact, no subject to which a member of Congress may not have occasion to refer." 20. Jefferson's library was a working collection for a scholar, not for display. It doubled the size of the original library, transforming it from a specialist's library to a more general one. 21. He organized his books based on Francis Bacon's organization of knowledge, grouping them into memory, reason, and imagination with 44 subdivisions. 22. The library used this scheme until the late 19th century when librarian Hobart Putnam introduced the Library of Congress classification, now applying to over 138 million items. A February 24, 1824, report from the Committee of Ways and Means recommended a $5,000 appropriation for the Library of Congress, noting the need to improve its collections in law, politics, commerce, history, and geography, which were crucial for Congress. 1851 to 1865, weakening. The Library of Congress, then located in the Capitol building in 1853. On December 24, 1851, the largest fire in the library's history destroyed 35,000 books, 2/3 of the library's collection, and 2/3 of Thomas Jefferson's original transfer. Congress appropriated $168,700 to replace the lost books in 1852 but not to acquire new materials. 24. By 2008, the librarians of Congress had found replacements for all but 300 of the works that had been documented as being in Jefferson's original collection. 25. This marked the start of a conservative period in the library's administration by librarian John Silva Meehan and Joint Committee Chairman James A. Pierce, who restricted the library's activities. 24. Meehan and Pierce's views about a restricted scope for the Library of Congress reflected those shared by members of Congress. While Meehan was a librarian, he supported and perpetuated the notion that the Congressional Library should play a limited role on the national scene and that its collections, by and large, should emphasize American materials of obvious use to the U.S. Congress. 26. In 1859, Congress transferred the library's public document distribution activities to the Department of the Interior and its International Book Exchange program to the Department of State. 27. During the 1850s, Smithsonian Institution librarian Charles Coffin Jewett aggressively tried to develop the Smithsonian as the United States National Library. His efforts were rejected by Smithsonian Secretary Joseph Henry, who advocated a focus on scientific research and publication. 28. To reinforce his intentions for the Smithsonian, Henry established laboratories, developed a robust physical sciences library, and started the Smithsonian Contributions to Knowledge, the first of many publications intended to disseminate research results. 29. For Henry, the Library of Congress was the obvious choice as the National Library. Unable to resolve the conflict, Henry dismissed Jewett in July 1854. In 1865, the Smithsonian Building, also called the Castle due to its Norman architectural style, was severely damaged by fire. This incident presented Henry with an opportunity related to the Smithsonian's non-scientific library. Around this time, the Library of Congress was planning to build and relocate to the new Thomas Jefferson Building, designed to be fireproof. 30. Authorized by an act of Congress, Henry transferred the Smithsonian's non-scientific library of 40,000 volumes to the Library of Congress in 1866. 31. In 1861, President Abraham Lincoln appointed John G. Stevenson as Librarian of Congress. The appointment is regarded as the most political to date. 32. Stevenson was a physician and spent equal time serving as librarian and as a physician in the Union Army. He could manage this division of interest because he hired Ainsworth Rand Spofford as his assistant. 32. Despite his new job, Stevenson focused on the war. 3 weeks into his term as Librarian of Congress, he left Washington, D.C., to serve as a volunteer aide-de-camp at the battles of Chancellorsville and Gettysburg during the American Civil War. 32. Stevenson's hiring of Spofford, who directed the library in his absence, may have been his most significant achievement. 32. 1865 to 1897, Spofford's expansion. Library of Congress stacks in the Capitol Building. Library of Congress in the Capitol Building in the 1890s. Librarian Hainsworth Rand Spofford, who directed the Library of Congress from 1865 to 1897, built broad bipartisan support to develop it as a national library and a legislative resource. 33. 34. He was aided by expansion of the federal government after the war and a favorable political climate. He began comprehensively collecting Americana and American literature, led the construction of a new building to house the library, and transformed the Librarian of Congress position into one of strength and independence. Between 1865 and 1870, Congress appropriated funds for the construction of the Thomas Jefferson Building, placed all copyright registration and deposit activities under the library's control, and restored the International Book Exchange. The library also acquired the vast libraries of the Smithsonian and of historian Peter Force, strengthening its scientific and Americana collections significantly. By 1876, the Library of Congress had 300,000 volumes. It was tied with the Boston Public Library as the nation's largest library. It moved from the Capitol Building to its new headquarters in 1897 with more than 840,000 volumes, 40% of which had been acquired through copyright deposit. 11. A year before the library's relocation, the Joint Library Committee held hearings to assess the condition of the library and plan for its future growth and possible reorganization. Spofford and 6 experts sent by the American Library Association, 35, testified that the library should continue its expansion to become a true national library. Based on the hearings, Congress authorized a budget that allowed the library to more than double its staff, from 42 to 108 persons. Senators Justin Moyle of Vermont and Daniel W. Voorhees of Indiana were particularly helpful in gaining this support. The library also established new administrative units for all aspects of the collection. In its bill, Congress strengthened the role of Librarian of Congress. It became responsible for governing the library and making staff appointments. As with presidential cabinet appointments, the Senate was required to approve presidential appointees to the position. Congressional Library. View from the U.S. Capitol. A 1902 aerial view from the United States Capitol of the 5-year-old Library of Congress in its new building that was renamed the Thomas Jefferson Building in 1980 in honor of Thomas Jefferson. Photograph of West Colonnade by Carol M. Highsmith. Thomas Jefferson Building, built 1890 to 1897, the Library of Congress's main building, on Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C., showing west side colonnade of Jefferson Building, viewed from across First Street and the grounds of the east front of the U.S. Capitol. With this support and the 1897 reorganization upon moving into its new home, the Library of Congress began to grow and develop more rapidly. Librarian Spofford's successor John Russell Young overhauled the library's bureaucracy, used his connections as a former diplomat to acquire more materials from around the world, and established the library's first assistance programs for the blind and physically disabled, with the establishment of the National Library Service for the blind and print disabled. Librarian Young's successor Herbert Putnam held the office for 40 years of the 20th century from 1899 to 1939. 2 years after he took office, the library became the first in the United States to hold 1 million volumes. 11. Putnam focused his efforts to make the library more accessible and useful for the public and for other libraries. He instituted the Interlibrary Loan Service, transforming the Library of Congress into what he referred to as a library of last resort. 37. Putnam also expanded library access to scientific investigators and duly qualified individuals, and began publishing primary sources for the benefit of scholars. 11. During Putnam's tenure, the library broadened the diversity of its acquisitions. In 1903, Putnam persuaded President Theodore Roosevelt to use an executive order to transfer the papers of the Founding Fathers from the State Department to the Library of Congress. Putnam also expanded foreign acquisitions, including the 1904 purchase of a 4,000-volume Library of Indica, the 1906 purchase of G. V. Udin's 80,000-volume Russian Library, the 1908 Schatz collection of early opera librettos, and the early 1930s purchase of the Russian Imperial Collection, consisting of 2,600 volumes from the library of the Romanov family on a variety of topics. Collections of Hebraica, Chinese, and Japanese works were also acquired. On one occasion, Congress initiated an acquisition. In 1929, Congressman Ross Collins, Democrat, Mississippi, gained approval for the library to purchase Otto Volber's collection of incunabula for $1.5 million. This collection, including one of 3 remaining perfect vellum copies of the Gutenberg Bible, 1138. Gutenberg Bible on display at the Library of Congress. Gutenberg Bible on display at the Library of Congress. Putnam established the Legislative Reference Service, LRS, in 1914 as a separative administrative unit of the library. Based on the progressive era's philosophy of science to be used to solve problems, and modeled after successful research branches of state legislatures, the LRS would provide informed answers to congressional research inquiries on almost any topic. Congress passed in 1925 an act allowing the Library of Congress to establish a trust fund board to accept donations and endowments, giving the library a role as a patron of the arts. The library received donations and endowments by such prominent wealthy individuals as John D. Rockefeller, James B. Wilbur, and Archer M. Huntington. Gertrude Clark Whitall donated 5 Stradivarius violins to the library. Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge's donations paid for a concert hall to be constructed within the Library of Congress building and an honorarium established for the music division to pay live performers for concerts. A number of chairs and consultantships were established from the donations, the most well-known of which is the Poet Laureate Consultant, 11. The library's expansion eventually filled the library's main building, although it used shelving expansions in 1910 and 1927. The library needed to expand into a new structure. Congress acquired nearby land in 1928 and approved construction of the Annex Building, later known as the John Adams Building, in 1930. Although delayed during the Depression years, it was completed in 1938 and opened to the public in 1939, 11. 1939 to 1987, National versus Legislative Role. What is now the Library of Congress's second structure of the John Adams Building that opened in 1939 on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. In 1939, following Putnam's retirement, President Franklin D. Roosevelt appointed poet and writer Archibald MacLeish as his successor. Occupying the post from 1939 to 1944 during the height of World War II, MacLeish became the most widely known librarian of Congress in the library's history. MacLeish encouraged librarians to oppose totalitarianism on behalf of democracy, dedicated the South Reading Room of the Adams Building to Thomas Jefferson, and commissioned artist Ezra Winter to paint 4 themed murals for the room. He established a democracy alcove in the main reading room of the Jefferson Building for essential documents such as the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Federalist Papers. The Library of Congress assisted during the war effort, ranging from storage of the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution in Fort Knox for safekeeping to researching weather data on the Himalayas for Air Force pilots. McLeish resigned in 1944 when appointed as Assistant Secretary of State. President Harry Truman appointed Luther H. Evans as Librarian of Congress. Evans, who served until 1953, expanded the library's acquisitions, cataloging, and bibliographic services. But he is best known for creating Library of Congress missions worldwide. Missions played a variety of roles in the post-war world. The mission in San Francisco assisted participants in the meeting that established the United Nations. The mission in Europe acquired European publications for the Library of Congress and other American libraries, and the mission in Japan aided in the creation of the National Diet Library. 11. The Adams Building, South Reading Room, with murals by Ezra Winter. Evans' successor Lawrence Quincy Mumford took over in 1953. During his tenure, lasting until 1974, Mumford directed the initiation of construction of the James Madison Memorial Building, the third Library of Congress building on Capitol Hill. Mumford led the library during the government's increased educational spending. The library was able to establish new acquisition centers abroad, including in Cairo and New Delhi. In 1967, the library began experimenting with book preservation techniques through a preservation office. This has developed as the most extensive library research and conservation effort in the United States. During Mumford's administration, the last significant public debate occurred about the Library of Congress's role as both a legislative and national library. Asked by Joint Library Committee Chairman Senator Claiborne Pell, Democrat, Rhode Island, to assess operations and make recommendations, Douglas Bryant of Harvard University Library proposed several institutional reforms. These included expanding national activities and services and various organizational changes, all of which would emphasize the library's federal role rather than its legislative role. Bryant suggested changing the name of the Library of Congress, a recommendation rebuked by Mumford as unspeakable violence to tradition. The debate continued within the library community for some time. The Legislative Reorganization Act of 1970 renewed emphasis for the library on its legislative roles, requiring a greater focus on research for Congress and congressional committees, and renaming the Legislative Reference Service as the Congressional Research Service. 11. James Madison Memorial Building opened in 1980. 39. After Mumford retired in 1974, President Gerald Ford appointed historian Daniel J. Borston as a librarian. Borston's first challenge was to manage the relocation of some sections to the new Madison Building, which took place between 1980 and 1982. With this accomplished, Borston focused on other areas of library administration, such as acquisitions and collections. Taking advantage of steady budgetary growth, from $116 million in 1975 to over $250 million by 1987, Borston enhanced institutional and staff ties with scholars, authors, publishers, cultural leaders, and the business community. His activities changed the post of Librarian of Congress so that by the time he retired in 1987, the New York Times called this office perhaps the leading intellectual public position in the nation. 1987 to 2015 Billington Leadership, Digitization, and Programs. In 1987, President Ronald Reagan nominated historian James H. Billington as the 13th Librarian of Congress, and the U.S. Senate unanimously confirmed the appointment. 40. Under Billington's leadership, The library doubled the size of its analog collections from 85.5 million items in 1987 to more than 160 million items in 2014. At the same time, it established new programs and employed new technologies to get the champagne out of the bottle. These included American Memory, created in 1990, which became the National Digital Library in 1994. It provides free access online to digitized American history and culture resources, including primary sources, with curatorial explanations to support use in K-12 education. 41. Thomas.gov website, launched in 1994 to provide free public access to U.S. federal legislative information with ongoing updates, and Congress.gov website to provide a state-of-the-art framework for both Congress and the public in 2012. Wink with a frown. 42. National Book Festival, founded in 2001 with First Lady Laura Bush, 43, has attracted more than 1,000 authors and 1 million guests to the National Mall and the Washington Convention Center to celebrate reading. With a major gift from David Rubenstein in 2013, the library established the Library of Congress Literacy Awards to recognize and support achievements in improving literacy in the U.S. and abroad. Wink with a frown. 44. Kluge Center, started with a grant of $60 million from John W. Kluge in 2000, brings international scholars and researchers to use library resources and to interact with policymakers and the public. It hosts public lectures and scholarly events, provides endowed Kluge fellowships, and awards the Kluge Prize for the Study of Humanity, now worth $1.5 million, the first